Content warning. On this podcast, we discuss sensitive issues, including but not limited to swearing, tasteless jokes, situations of a sexual nature, and drug use. This podcast is not intended for children. Hello. Welcome to BiblioWrecks, where I get to take my rage out on a book.
Boy, already. Just breaking everything. Yep, let's do this. I'm Bam Bam.
I am rage-filled books. I'm sorry.
This episode nearly broke us.
We have been having conversations between ourselves about this subject for several days in an attempt to get out our irritation and come in with our thoughtful points and insights and exploration of the world this novel shows us. I might be failing at that today. I apologize ahead of time.
Well, even if we do, we still won't be the biggest failures in the conversation, so.
That is true.
Today, we're doing
The Trial of William Shakespeare, a Love Story by Robert Boog.
And, boy, do I not give a fuck about Shakespeare.
I still don't. Oh my god.
Yeah, okay, so when you're doing a historical thing or you're trying to get somebody interested in a really narrow subject line, there are ways to do it. I don't give a shit about Da Vinci or Renaissance paintings or anything like that, but Dan Brown knows how to draw you in, make it interesting. And boy, this just doesn't do that.
No, and just a quick explanation of why we're doing this book.
Explanation would be better. Synopsis. This book defies synopsis.
Yes. I joined a website called matchmaker.fm in an attempt to share our podcast trailers with other podcasts. Instead, a bunch of authors messaged me wanting me to review their books, and they didn't bother reading the bio that I attached to our profile that said, "We make fun of bad books." And authors would say, "Hey, review my book." And I'd say, "Hey, we do bad books. We're not going to really pull punches. We'll try to be respectful, but send me a PDF. We'll review it, and if it's bad, I'll tell you." Robert Boog told me to change the name of my podcast.
Yeah, because he thinks his is so good that we would have to change the entire concept of the podcast in order to
accommodate his brilliance.
Right.
I warned him that if he wanted us to review it, we review bad books. And he said, change the name of your podcast to BiblioWrecks and Treasures, because what if you read a good book?
And we took that personally.
Yeah, I took that a little personally.
We
because
sure did.
I was giving him an off-ramp. Hey, sorry for bugging you. This is not the right match for genres here. So I said, you know what? Let's just read it and decide if this is a good book or a bad book.
So I read it first, and absolute hell. And then you read it, and then you read it again. This
is the most boring book I've ever read.
I'm
sorry, Mr. Boog, if you listen to this, we are not going to be nice. We did not like this book.
Yeah.
I can go ahead and tell you this is a D-. Skip to the end. We've told you. So if you don't want your feelings to get hurt, turn it off right now. Everyone else, we will try to not put you to sleep. Oh my god.
Oh boy.
It was an AI voice reading the Audible version of this book.
Yep, it was.
We listened to it at 1.5 speed separately on our own.
Yeah, well, at least. I switched over to 1.7 because, oh boy, it was getting real dry.
It's very slow, it's very dry, and I would go and listen to something else, anything else to wake up.
Yep.
I have gone through the plot, and I've tried to make it kind of like, these are the things that happen. And it's kind of difficult because a lot of it's arguing over authorship of Shakespeare. And we count how many J's and I's are used in a text.
Yeah, and that's pretty fucking boring.
It's really boring.
So, basic idea here. We're doing a trial to determine who actually authored the works of Shakespeare.
Did Shakespeare write Shakespeare?
Or did Mr.
Edward de Vere, Lord of Oxford.
If I slip up and say Robert de Vere, I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep doing that.
Yeah. I just call him Vere in most of my notes.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, okay, this could be an interesting concept. We have this famous author, everyone's heard of Shakespeare, everyone loves him, blah, blah, blah. Maybe he didn't write it. Maybe someone else did. And we want to put them on trial because we want to use evidence to establish truths in this area.
And we use time travel badly.
Very badly.
But, yeah, basically it's just pulling characters from the past or people from the past, trying to establish whether there's a good case to be made as to whether Shakespeare is actually the author or maybe perhaps Edward de Vere is the author.
Or Francis Bacon, or a group of people, or blah, blah, blah.
Because it wants to make this book is trying to make the case that Edward de Vere is used an allonym.
Right. An allonym is where an author pays someone else to be the face of the name, the face of the book. I wrote the book. I paid you money to claim that you're Bugs and you wrote this book. That's why I don't have to deal with any political repercussions from the book. That's what an allonym is.
Right. And yeah, there were political ramifications for Edward de Vere, and that's why he wanted Shakespeare to do it, so that it wouldn't be Edward getting his head cut off for slandering the Queen. It would be Shakespeare.
Right. We open up, and Michael McKenzie is our narrator protagonist, who is lawyer for the plaintiff, which is Edward de Vere. We're in a courthouse in L.A. in 2024.
Mind-bogglingly. Like why we're in California instead of Europe, because both plaintiffs are from England.
Yes. And we have a time traveling machine that spits out a hologram of these characters who then can take the stand or talk to you.
And everything about the time travel stuff is nonsense.
None of it is cohesive or makes sense.
Because what they're doing is they're pulling someone who is dead to the future, but also their soul.
Because they have been experiencing modern history the whole time.
Yeah.
They have seen they know modern slang, modern technology. They know what's going on in geography and in the world. And they claim to, care about, I guess, their, reputation now.
For some reason. And, so it's just a ghost. It's a ghost with a hologram on it.
Yeah, they're basically pulling out ghosts who are able to have opinions and say stuff about the past.
Which I don't know why you would have to have a time travel machine for that.
It's because we want to send Mackenzie, the lawyer, back in time to see stuff that happened then.
That part makes, relative sense, but as far as, the ghosts in modern time, there's no reason you would have to have, a time machine.
You could have a medium doing a seance and get the same information.
Right.
Yeah. He throws around the word AI to explain anything he doesn't want to deal with.
Right.
Technologically.
Yeah, pretty much. So, the judge, his summary of what this trial is going to be at the beginning of the trial, he specifically says, using the latest in AI technology, we will settle once and for all the question, did Shakespeare write the works attributed to him?
Right.
And that's important for later.
That's important because that's how we start. We are going to establish once and for all.
Yeah,
Did Shakespeare write Shakespeare?
We are trying to prove or disprove Shakespeare as the author.
The story starts out on the first day of the trial, and it isn't even a civil case. It's called part of the Court of Public Opinion series. This
Which just
is
sounds
just
goofy.
television court. This isn't even a real case.
Right. And, like, the co-counsel for the main character, Mackenzie, she isn't there for most of the trial because she has in Mackenzie's words, a more important trial to do.
Half the book she's off doing something else.
Because this trial, like in the book's own words, this story is not important.
Yeah.
It's saying that to the audience. Why should the audience then give a shit?
And this isn't even, what is the judgment going to mean or matter to anyone? There's no money on the table.
It's one douchebag that's been dead for 400 years or another douchebag that's been dead for 400 years.
Right.
Who gives a fuck?
This doesn't impact anyone. And even later on, we find out Mackenzie only took it because he'd lost 2 other cases.
Yeah, and he's wanting to garner some reputation.
And he's wanting to build his reputation by having this big publicity case. Mr. Wales is the attorney for the defense, who is Shakespeare. He files a motion for summary judgment because Shakespeare's name is on the first folio.
He's just like, his name's on the book, so clearly he did it. This should be thrown out, obviously.
I mean, he was known as an actor. He was known in these circles. And because the author has a very clear agenda, he does not explore any of the actual facts around Shakespeare's life. I'm going to just tell you, dear listener, I didn't look it up because I don't care.
Yeah, we don't care about Shakespeare. We're kind of just going at it from coherency within the book.
I'm trying to go at it as just, does the novel make sense as a novel? Because you can tell me the sky is red and aliens are walking amongst us, and if you can make a compelling story, I'll be like, yeah, sky is red, aliens among us, cool, let's go on this journey. And so that's how I approached this. I don't care who wrote it, so I don't have a dog in this fight. Either way. I'm fine either way.
We don't, wake up tomorrow, we find out Shakespeare didn't write those works.
My life.
How does your day change? Just the day.
Right.
You look at your phone, you go, huh, and then you just go make breakfast or something.
Yeah. I literally, I have no personal preference either way.
So the prosecution brings up...
Plaintiff.
Yeah, the plaintiff. Brings up a movie called Roman Holiday.
Which, that's his reason to not
throw it out.
Give a summary judgment and just throw this out. Is, hey, in this other instance of this movie, the author used an allonym, therefore it is possible in the universe for an allonym to happen.
Yeah, so you could make that case about literally every work, every kind of movie or book or something like that, and it applies just as much.
The other reason he brings up in that argument is that Shakespeare's plays had music in them, which was common at the time, but Shakespeare himself was not known to be a musician. Those are the only things he has, and he's like, I promise, Judge, we have new facts coming. I promise.
And
the whole time the judge is holding his hand saying, okay, buddy, let's move on. Come on, you gotta give me a little more. I'm trying to wink at you, but you gotta give me a little more, bud. Because this is very clearly biased against Mr. Wales and toward Mackenzie.
Oh, boy.
They decided to limit witnesses to only people who were alive at the time or who knew Shakespeare or Vere.
Yeah, very arbitrary time machine rules, just so that you can't go back and actually witness one of the characters writing something.
That was the other part, is the dates the time machine are constrained to are 1570 through 1594. And they're only allowed to go back in time to those years.
And that's such a waste of time machine.
Why do we have a time machine if we can't use it?
Right. To get actual the actual physical evidence it would require. But it's just a literary device. It's just a really stupid one.
Right, and he has to put that up because this author has decided he's going to use established facts in this novel and not actually use his imagination and show how this would have happened or how it could have happened.
And there's better ways to do that. You could somehow connect like a murder mystery to it, or some psycho that is obsessed with who is the real author or something like that. Attach it like that. You don't have to have time travel if you're not actually going to go back and grab a physical piece of evidence that proves the thing. But also he wanted to make it a love story?
Yeah, because there's another actual book named The Trial of William Shakespeare. And when I was trying to look up this book, that book came up because you have to have the subtitle, a love story, to differentiate this one from that one.
Right.
Because this has already been done before by other people.
Yeah.
Also, when they go back in time, one button on the machine makes you invisible. The other button on the machine allows you to inhabit somebody's body like a demon.
Yeah.
But you can't impact them or do anything, except Mackenzie absolutely does change things.
Very unclear, because it says you can't change what happened in the past at the beginning of the book. Later on, Mackenzie himself questions this as if he's got some evidence to the contrary, but...
No, I wrote it down where Maya tells him, you're following this other... You pulled a plot from a movie and you're doing it and causing these things to happen. Also, when he goes back in time, it's narrated as if Mackenzie is doing the things.
Yeah.
Not Anthony Monday, the body he's inhabiting.
Right.
So it really clouds the issue of whether Mackenzie is the one doing these things.
Or he's just passenging in a body that's making those decisions.
Yeah, that part is really poorly written, needs to be completely redrafted.
Yeah.
Like, I need you to sit down and make hard decisions. Are they just observing or not? And then go through and clean up every section
Right.
where that happened.
But yeah, the case, not prosecution, what was it you said?
Plaintiff.
The plaintiff. His entire case is going to be based on spelling, music, and maps.
Yes.
And boy, is it just not convincing.
I was not convinced. I was just bored. And DeVere says, if you don't get up and tell them that this is a love story, I'm not going to testify.
Yeah, like...
He's the plaintiff.
Yeah.
His testimony is what would actually establish you have a case here.
And he's leveraging that against his lawyer.
Who's on his side?
So that he can make the case weird? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense why he's doing this. Even at the end, it still doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Mackenzie is like, okay, because I have to have my actual guy testify. He goes back in time, and every time he goes back, he doesn't choose the date or place. The AI just spits him out where the plot needs him to go.
Yeah, at one point he said the app does the heavy lifting, which is just his way of saying, I'm too lazy to explain my stupid time travel bullshit.
Yeah, because Mackenzie goes back in time, and it's after Anne, his wife, has died. DeVere is drinking, and we see him get in an argument with his father-in-law, Lord Burleigh. And DeVere has shown to be a negligent father who doesn't care what happens to his daughters. And he's smirking about his wife being dead.
Yeah.
And just drinking himself pissed.
And clearly doesn't give a shit.
Clearly doesn't give a shit.
And the story tries to make it out like, oh, well, everyone deals with grief differently. And back then, the only way they had to deal with it was to get drunk and be an asshole.
And even Mackenzie isn't convinced.
Right.
He's like, you didn't seem very unhappy. And he's like, oh, we didn't know how to cope. And it's like, you could have actually just shown him, like, is this in a journal somewhere? Was this written in Burleigh's diary that we had to have this date turn out this way?
Well, presumably it would have been, like, Burleigh's journal, him saying, that Robert de Vere doesn't give a shit about his wife. What a bastard.
Right. Mackenzie's arguments are that de Vere claims he loved the plays, poems, and sonnets like they were his babies. He was
Which is fucked up because
he doesn't care about his own children.
Right. He sends his 2 daughters to live with Burleigh, and he's just like, try to do better than you did with me, whatever.
Because he was raised by Burleigh.
Yeah.
As a ward of the state.
Which, if he thinks that Burleigh fucked up raising him, why would you just be okay with sending your daughters with
Right.
You fucking... Ugh.
Yeah, so this kind of argument was really weird.
Mm-hmm.
And the other argument is he was afraid of offending the queen or his father-in-law, and so he used an allonym. And the reason it was de Vere and not Shakespeare is because de Vere was educated and had spelling patterns that Shakespeare didn't or couldn't have.
Yeah.
This is the, not opening arguments, opening statements, basically, of like, I'm going to prove to you he had to have an allonym. The spelling will prove it. I swear to God. And Shakespeare was just dumb. He didn't know nothing.
He barely spoke. This book that has Shakespeare's goddamn name on the book, he speaks like
almost nothing.
half a dozen times in the entire book.
He even writes paragraphs about how he couldn't pin Shakespeare down on anything. Because
he just wouldn't answer any questions.
He wouldn't answer any questions. He completely avoids writing what Shakespeare would have said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's not enough evidence as to what Shakespeare would have said. Because a lot of these people, you have to inject something into their mouth for them to say. Because these people lived 400 fucking years ago. You have no idea what they thought about political issues or what things were going on at the time unless they specifically wrote them down, and even that is up to interpretation.
Right. And a lot of stuff was copied by scribes who we know change things. Mm-hmm. They change spellings and the way sentences are structured and how paragraphs are broken up.
The book brings up there are goddamn scribes.
I know.
And it still harps on the spelling issue like it fucking matters.
Yeah.
Like it keeps trying it very stupidly tries to make the case that Shakespeare didn't write these works because he could not goddamned read.
Right. Mr. Wales, for the defense, contends that there is no evidence for Shakespeare not being the author, especially since de Vere died in 1604 when only a third of the plays had been published. Mm-hmm.
And that lawyer, his line of questioning didn't make any sense because he's asking de Vere how the time travel works at one point.
Yeah.
So his line of questioning just doesn't make any sense.
The entire time, the lawyer for the defense cannot make any good points because he's a straw man.
Yeah.
And
a stupid one,
the author is unwilling to actually look at what Shakespeare defenders say.
Yeah.
I think.
Because there's a reason that Shakespeare being believed to be the author is the mainstream view. It's because there's a lot of fairly good evidence that he was.
And his names are on it.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, this is where I got distracted. Who's paying for all of this? Someone has to be paying the lawyers. Someone had to go back in time and tell de Vere that his name wasn't on these folios.
Right.
And Shakespeare's getting all the fame and glory. Who was the initiator for all of this?
Right. Yeah, that doesn't...
Why is it in LA? Who initiated this? Mm-hmm. And why did they choose Mackenzie and Wales?
Who's got the money in Robert de Vere?
Edward de Vere?
Edward de Vere, yeah. Who's got the money in Edward de Vere being the author? Is this like some sort of weird mafia betting scheme or something?
Right, because later on it's mentioned that somebody wants to settle, and they're like, $150,000 is a lot of money.
It's
and they're acting
the Shakespeare...
like Mackenzie himself will get that cash.
Right.
That's not how a lawyer doing a case works. They get some of it. They don't get all of it.
Right. But yeah, that was the Shakespeare tourism industry.
Yeah. Oh, big Shakespeare industry over there.
Big.
With all their big money.
Big manufacturing.
So I feel like the premise itself is completely flawed. We don't need to be on LA. We don't know who brought this case. Mackenzie's only on the case for fame and glory, and he doesn't even know what his closing arguments are going to be. Why does Shakespeare care? Why don't he just say, yep, it was an L&M, end of story? Why does De Vere care? None of these, there's no motive for any of this to happen.
Right.
Which is, I think, part of why it's so boring.
Yeah.
I'm not invested.
Because there's no reason anyone should care, really.
Oh, I have this really funny quote about, they were like, oh, you know slang or modern speech. I think it was De Vere saying this. Just because one is dead does not mean we do not know what is going on in your world here. We keep track of music, culture, art, and language. I love the street artist Banksy, for example. But now enough time has passed for you to know that I alone wrote the plays, poems, and sonnets attributed to William Shakespeare.
Okay, but
that is
why?
the only line of motivation we have for why De Vere cares. That is the sentence.
Which later it's going to switch because it tries to make the case that this is a love story. He's trying to make it known that his wife that he didn't care about was a really important person.
Later on, he tries to say that he wrote these as autobiographical and before his love of his wife, who he ignored for 5 years.
Yeah. So
we go over Vere's childhood. We discuss his use of the letter W instead of U in spelling.
Or the I's instead of J's because Latin or something.
Greek, Latin, and Italian don't have U's and J's. So he used W's and I's in their place.
Yeah.
We are sparing you 3 chapters of argument over this. And literally in the book, there's screenshots of the Internet Archive of how many times the word grief with 2 E's was shown because that was how he spelled it compared to the correct spelling Grief. But spelling wasn't standardized.
Yeah, and it brings that up several times, but it's like trying to put its opponent argument in, but it never treats it as if it matters. Because what Mackenzie thinks is, since he grew up in Catholic school, and Shakespeare also supposedly grew up in Catholic school, that the standards for writing practices were exactly the same.
He tries to say that when he grew up, all the teachers cared about was penmanship. And because Shakespeare had terrible penmanship, he couldn't have been in a strict school.
Yeah.
If you told me that Shakespeare was left-handed and had dyslexia, I would say case closed.
Yeah.
I've known someone who grew up in the 60s or 70s who was left-handed and got punished severely for writing with his left hand. He had to use his right hand, and his penmanship was always awful.
And sometimes, those lessons just don't take, like, especially if you're getting hit about them.
Yeah.
And, for some people that works, I guess, but for some people that might just fuck them up more. So that's
Also,
really a nothing.
Another thing is Shakespeare was supposed to be in Latin grammar school, which also doesn't have U's and J's.
Yeah.
The argument applying to Vere and not Shakespeare makes 0 sense. That why we would apply this change in spelling to one and not say the other one could have used it as well.
Yeah, and it's just treating people as if they're static their entire lives.
Right. Nobody's methods change. Nobody's spelling changes over their lifetime.
Yeah, and the culture changes, and stylistic things happen. Because for the however many years he was in that grammar school, maybe after he got out, it was like a sense of rebellion every time he got to use the I instead of the J or whatever. And,
or I just had a brain fart and I just wrote it this way.
Yeah, or he didn't fucking care.
I found this interesting.
Because no one else cared.
It wasn't in the book. It was on it was a website I was looking up. De Vere died in 1606, but William Shakespeare died in 1616, and all of the plays weren't published until 1623. So they were both dead when the first folio was published.
Right.
That doesn't mean anything toward either one.
Yeah,
to me.
It means nothing for anybody. Yeah.
They argue about constellations and say that in the Tempest they were
the
referring
Bermuda.
to Bermuda, and he said no, it was the Bouteilles, which was the ox man in the sky, which
Yeah.
I'm Oxford, duh. And I don't care.
Yeah, it's just an interpretation thing. It's one Shakespeare nerd's interpretation over another's, so it doesn't matter.
However, the author really wants you to believe that everyone is deeply invested in this. I have this quote.
Oh my god, the audience. They're leaning in.
The audience was breathless so often. If you don't believe me, Ovid mentions Bouteilles in Metamorphosis, so obviously I would have had to help translate Metamorphosis in order to write The Tempest. That's, De Vere speaking. The defense lawyer looks mad enough to punch De Vere, and they are adjourned for recess. Like, that was some point he made just now.
Yeah.
Like, why would the other lawyer be this invested either?
Also, whenever he comes out of the time machine or whatever and goes onto the stand, the story tries to tell us that Edward de Vere, as he's walking in, some of the female jurors are like breathless for a moment because he's so hot.
So handsome.
And even the picture that's in this book, he looks like a weird mustachioed baby man.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
Giant forehead on this motherfucker.
Macbeth was supposed to be based on Vere's father-in-law, Lord Burleigh. And then Mackenzie takes this little side thing to explain why he took the case. And it's because he was orphaned at 14 and he found solace playing guitar. And De Vere was orphaned at 14 and he played the lute. That makes them similar. Except, in a brief Google search, De Vere was orphaned at 12. And this author didn't bother to do that little bit of research.
And also would have gotten adopted, like, immediately by, what was it,
He
Cecil?
became a ward of the state at that point because he was, like, a lord and the queen decided where he lived.
Yeah, because he was part of the
royalty.
aristocracy or whatever.
When people are like, Shakespeare may have had palsy or a lousy teacher, this is Mackenzie's reason for not believing them. People make all kind of excuses for him, and maybe it's just me, but I never met a strict elementary school teacher who would allow a sloppy signature to go unpunished. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That doesn't engage with the palsy claim at all.
No, it's saying, oh, you're just making excuses for him, and it's like, they didn't have medicine in 1598. How do you know?
Yeah. Like, you're just making, just shunting away arguments that could possibly defeat yours because you don't want to deal with them because you don't have any way to prove or disprove.
Next, Mackenzie claims that De Vere helped translate and co-author Metamorphosis because it also had double E's, even though Golding is the one whose name is actually on that work.
Yeah, Edward de Vere wrote fucking everything.
According to this author and this lawyer, anytime he was in the room, he was the one writing it because it had double E's. In grief, she, the, whatever other ones there were. And it's like, maybe people just spelled stuff however they wanted.
Yeah. Or, I don't know, like...
And he doesn't even prove that De Vere worked on Metamorphosis. He just argued about Golding using YNG or ING in different times of his life.
Right, and that's all he's really doing. Like, he's not proving he's like trying to make another case. Every time he's talking to someone, he's making another case that tries to muddy up the water, because that's the best you can do with this stuff, is try to make it more confusing. You can't prove or disprove any of this shit with the evidence that we have, because there's nothing compelling.
And by the time we get copies of these works, it could have been people trying to fix the spelling.
Yeah.
It could have been other people saying, hey, this is written with one E.
Could have been...
let's just go through and correct this.
Yeah, it could have been like a one of the people, the printers, or it could have been whoever was taking dictation. Yeah.
I have a quote to show you how the author tells and doesn't show. With a decisive bang of the gavel, the judge announces another recess. A palpable tension hangs heavy in the air as the courtroom falls silent. Wales, my counterpart, shoots me a steely glance, but I meet his gaze unflinchingly. The battle lines are drawn, and the war of words has only begun. They don't have a war of words. They have hours and hours of I's and J's. And the defense doesn't really engage with it because none of it matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because for them, it's just, they're trying to deal with the things that actually are provable.
Mackenzie also argues that De Vere knew about geography because he lived in a house with lots of books and maps, and someone who hadn't left the country couldn't know any of the towns in Italy.
Yeah, when, Shakespeare could have just asked someone who knew more than he did.
Yeah.
Or it could just be a coincidence.
Yeah.
Like, he makes a big deal about every time it got copied over or something like that, that it moved to another city that is on the same latitude line.
I have the exact argument written down. Hold on.
It's like Ephesus, Turkey, and one other place. Like, it just, every time it gets changed, it moves to somewhere east on that latitude line.
On the stand, Mackenzie is questioning Mr. Noel about tutoring De Vere. Mm-hmm. He taught him cosmology, and he says De Vere was brilliant. He was a prodigy. He was so
the
smart.
Smartest boy
ever. The teacher traveled a lot, and he says the first globe ever belonged to Lord Burleigh.
Allegedly.
And was at the Cecil House.
How do you track that?
I tried to look it up and could not find anything about that.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty big alleged there.
Also, when I was going back through the novel, it said English-made globe.
Yeah, that's pretty specific.
That's pretty specific.
I know in the Middle East there were a lot of people that figured that stuff out. And on top of that,
I
had ways...
read the first German-made globe was in like the 1400s or something.
Yeah, there you go.
But the argument is that in the Comedy of Errors, it mentions a globe. And only De Vere had seen a globe and knew what that sort of shape was. So Shakespeare couldn't have written about a globe because he couldn't possibly know what a globe was. It was based on Menashmi by Plautus, but it moved the three cities 400 miles east along the 37th degrees north latitude line, a feat only possible to someone with access to a globe. Because the idea is that instead of just picking three other cities in a different location, it had to be along that latitude line, and that's proof, not coincidence.
As far as I know, those cities being on that latitude line in the story doesn't really matter.
No, because we're just changing it from Ephesus to Rome or something.
Yeah.
Or Ephesus to
Turkey.
Somewhere in Italy.
And all it's doing is just moving it further east or west. And
right. And so, and even Maya is like, that could have been coincidence. And he's like, oh.
He's like, nah, 2 coincidences in a row, that would be crazy.
We've mentioned Maya, but we haven't really talked about her. She's Mackenzie's girlfriend, and she's Asian. We later find out she's actually Korean. Just call her Korean American.
Right.
I don't know why we had to say beautiful almond-eyed Asian girl. It felt like really weird to me, the way he describes her. She has a college student daughter who, quote, dresses too provocatively. But if he criticizes her, she'll get mad at me and then overshare with all her friends on social media.
He's afraid of getting canceled, I guess.
No, criticized.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe just don't spend your time judging her body.
Yeah.
Just move on. She's 19.
Maybe it's none of your goddamn business,
Maybe
actually.
It's none of your business. Mackenzie claims that spelling patterns are similar to cell phone data.
Are they, though?
No, not at all. But what does that prove? Anything? Maya asked him. Well, hopefully more people will connect the dots, is what he replies.
Yeah, make the same stupid jump you did.
This is really grasping at straws. It's like, these two things were spelled the same. They have to have been written by the same people, ... And then we take a hard turn into the past. Like, we're at dinner talking about these things, and then we are in the past, and Mackenzie, Maya, and Arya, Maya's daughter, are all in the bodies of the people at this party. Interestingly, Mackenzie is in the body of Anthony Monday, an aristocrat.
Yep.
And Maya and Arya are in the bodies of servants.
Yep, that's crazy.
Even though there were women aristocrats there.
Yeah, that had no part in the story, that, it wouldn't have affected anything differently if, they took their bodies.
But we just gotta put them in their place?
Right.
I don't know. It felt
You gotta have your hot Asian girlfriend in a maid outfit. Why else have a hot Asian girlfriend?
I just felt like, why are you taking them back? They don't get to see or do anything interesting. You're the only one who gets to be there and
interact with anything
or do anything fun. Even the daughter is like, why did I go back in time and I have to do work?
Yeah, it's...
That was just very annoying.
So that whole thing was about Henry de Vere.
It was, Henry de Vere's daughter Elizabeth being betrothed to Henry Wriothesley.
Oh, okay.
Wriothesley was vaguely related to them somehow.
Yeah.
I think he was a ward of Burleigh as well or something. And he refuses the marriage.
Right.
Henry does. And Burleigh's like, I'm going to fine you £5,000 if you don't do this marriage. And he's like, fine, I'll pay it.
And Henry de Vere's just like, I'll fucking kill you.
I'll kill you. I'll kill you. And
You've ruined my family name, you shit, or something.
And it's like just to prove that Burleigh is scary, I think. Like, that was the whole point.
Well, it comes back up later again whenever we get to the Francis Bacon thing. But it still doesn't...
It still doesn't matter, though.
Right.
All these people fucking knew each other.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whoop-dee.
Big conspiracy. They all knew each other.
Guess what? Shakespeare also probably knew some of those people.
He probably knew most of these people, too.
He might have asked Francis Bacon about the fucking globe thing.
Yeah, like, who knows? This trip didn't answer any questions, so he goes back another 10 years alone. And this time he witnesses de Vere quoting Sonnet 18 to his 17-year-old lover.
Which can't be proved.
And I think this is maybe the only time we see the author put Shakespeare's words into de Vere's mouth. It was the only time I saw it, like, conclusively.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, I don't know Shakespeare all that well anyway.
Right.
So it could have been, like, scattered throughout, and I wouldn't give a shit either then. But you know who else doesn't give a shit?
Oh, kill me now. I don't.
Our advertisers.
Yeah, they don't care about this either. I'm sorry, man. They are also asleep on the floor.
Hello, bad book loving friends. Just updating our socials. We're on Blue Sky now at bugs-bibliowrecks.bsky.social. We have a Substack at Bugs and Books, and the profile name is Bugs at BiblioWrecks. And of course, our website, BiblioWrecks.com. Drop us a message and check out the content that Bugs works on. She's really good at the social stuff. And let's get back to that bad book. And we're back to fucking...
This is a sleep aid. You could bottle this and sell it as a sleep aid.
Oh, God.
I can read this to my son at midnight when he is bugging me to death, and he would just...
I swear, when I started my second read-through, I was listening, and then all of a sudden the audio just started getting, like, really shrill, like there was a scream happening, and then at some point I looked at my phone and the audio had paused, and the screaming was me. I was screaming. It was me. So, we're back in the past.
Where
the extra
de Vere,
past.
And he's in the body of Anthony Monday, I think. And
His boy.
He's visiting de Vere. And de Vere has been ignoring his wife for years. And he's taken a lover, Anna Vavasour.
Oh, before we get to that, I had one note when Mackenzie is in the body of Anthony Monday and he's talking to DeVere and Anne when they're, both young and courting.
No, this is his lover. This is not his wife.
Oh.
That's why you should have gone back and looked at the page. He's teasing her, right? This is not his wife. This is him as a 35-year-old man who has been married, flirting with a French girl who is actually like a lady in waiting to the queen. And DeVere is just there for
I thought that's just who his wife was.
Nope.
Oh.
She was Anne Cecil, daughter of Lord Burleigh, and it was an arranged marriage.
Oh.
And they did not court. They did not like each other.
Oh, okay.
This is him having fun with his girl on the side.
Oh, okay.
And this is why he gets arrested later.
Yeah, okay. I totally missed that.
I thought that this was back to when they first met each other and were in love too.
Yeah.
Because both of his girls are named Anne.
Yeah, nothing fucking confusing about that.
And the AI voice reading didn't give her a French accent.
Well, it tried to.
Well,
it tried. It said sacre bleu, but it came out sacre bleu.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so funny. I had so much fun listening to the AI occasionally. It mostly sucks, but there's a couple of funny bits.
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to make didn't have anything to do with Anne anyway. So, but DeVere was accused by two other guys. I can't remember their names, but I think they're like supposedly cronies of Shakespeare later on or something. But in a letter to those two guys, he made a mention that he had had sex with several Italian boys or something. And he just like waves it off like, oh yeah, that was just a joke. I was just trying to get a rise out of them. And boy, that's a real weird fucking joke. I don't understand how that is funny to anyone.
That really strikes me as odd that that's the same person who had to have an Alanim for fear of his life.
Yeah.
He's willing to joke about being a homosexual.
And about being an atheist. Like it says he's very cavalier about this.
Yeah.
But also is afraid enough that he has to pay someone else to take credit for his work.
Right. That doesn't jive. That personality is not the same person.
Right.
Either you're cavalier and you make jokes about sleeping with Italian boys, or you're terrified of everyone ever finding out you wrote this stuff.
Right.
How is this the same person? This is a really weird, extra weird conspiracy theory here.
Is it the reading?
It says that he wrote Sonnet 18 for his mother, who he claims was Queen Mary.
Yeah, because the queen was like, "Oh, you're a bastard," and also
just
your
as crazy
mother,
as your mother, Mary,
my sister,
my sister,
my sister, your mom, our relationship, and definitely in quotes.
And I have a overview of the life of Edward de Vere, and it was on an Oxfordshire website that tries to show proof that he authored it, not Shakespeare. And this website itself said that his mother was Marjorie, the sister of Arthur Golding.
So this is another fringe theory on top of this already fringe theory. He couldn't just let it alone.
He picks at every little thing like a scab and has to add more to it. He is even more fringe than the website purporting to be about why this guy would be the author of this stuff.
Right.
So I was just like, but it didn't matter later anyway. His parentage didn't matter in the story.
Speaking of another thing that doesn't matter...
I just got to the next slide and my thing. Oh, it's funny. Okay.
I wanted to make a mention. At one point, he's gone to the past, and he comes back like just in the nick of time to get to court again. And it makes a reference to him smelling like smoke and wine from the past. And I'm just like, how does smell that you weren't actually interacting with.
His body has been sitting in this little box
Right.
the whole time.
Yeah, and like I think the explanation is like he's phased halfway in and halfway out of the past, and that's why he doesn't like appear visibly in the past. So
We're still breaking time travel rules
right.
here.
So he's going back, interacting with these particles, and then coming back. So those particles should be like the ghost of a ghost of a ghost of a smell.
It's a ghost smell. Speaking of the time machine, I found this really funny quote. Maya is speaking to him around the time travel stuff, and she says, "Hopefully you are not eating up your client's time. Did you ever think about that?" I didn't. That pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, what the fuck does that mean? Is there only like a limited amount of time that your person is allowed to be there?
I would imagine it also would be really expensive.
Right. So
This would be taking a huge amount of energy or something.
yeah, probably.
So the author bothered to write that. Mm-hmm. His character didn't have time to think about whether he's using up his client's time, but we had time to think about Arya's clothing choices and criticize them. Mm-hmm. Priorities, man.
Yeah.
Priorities.
Also, at one point he's in the past and he uses Google Maps to find where the fuck he's going.
No, he said, Google Maps didn't take me to Stratford-upon-Avon, but I got there eventually. It was a joke.
It still sounds like he was using Google Maps to me, though.
It sounds like he was wishing he could. I looked at that sentence very carefully because it didn't make much sense.
I'll take your word for it. Again, leaving it up to interpretation, you can read the same line and come to two different conclusions.
Oh my god.
Which just proves that this case is fucking stupid.
On the stand, Mackenzie questions Thomas North about his life and his politics. His education was paid for by Lord Burleigh, and he was a spy for him. He spelled U-Y-O-U and she with one E. He avoids the word the and always writes hand instead of hands. But in his later works, he uses double E's and the implication is that Vere helped him write but wasn't credited. Mm-hmm. Because anytime anyone uses double E's, it had to have been Vere.
Right, so again, a third person.
This is another author that he's claiming De Vere was the actual genius behind it, too.
Well, I don't think this guy was an author. He was a translator.
I think this was supposed to have been him translating some other work and saying De Vere was the one who did that instead.
Right.
And the idea is that the reason De Vere's name wasn't on it is because Thomas North was actually spying for Burleigh somewhere else. And to hide the fact he was out of the country, they had De Vere do the work, but put North's name on it. So we're adding more conspiracies to try to make this puzzle fit. We're trying to just wedge this together to say, this is proof and not coincidence.
Yeah.
Or someone changing, or someone having a scribe do it instead, or whatever. Mackenzie goes back in time to visit Anne Cecil, the one who is the wife.
Yeah, and he implants the idea to dress up as a man in order to interact with her husband.
Because she's lost 100 pounds and he would never recognize her now.
Yeah, his wife.
His wife.
However many years.
That he grew up with in the same household and saw her presumably before she was fat.
Hey, you put a mustache on anyone, I won't recognize them.
I mean, I wouldn't. I'm face blind. He asks Anne to help him. Like, he is a scribe for De Vere, and he asks Anne to come and be his copier and spell check, basically.
Yeah.
Which establishes that De Vere has a scribe. And it was Monday.
Right.
So why the fuck do we care about these and e's and griefs and cheese?
Yeah, so because there's other people that are doing the writing, so... Oh, god damn it, I don't care. Fuck, this is stupid.
I know.
While Anne Cecil is talking to her husband, she takes the name. She's told by Anthony Munday to use the name
Romelio?
Romelio, but she fucks it and she says Romeo. So Anthony Munday or Mackenzie is inspiring Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
And that's the funny that's happening.
Even though DeVere doesn't realize that's his wife, and he doesn't fall in love with Romeo.
Right. Which the story acts like he does, kind of. Like he's like suddenly really interested in Romeo for some reason.
Right. Like magnetism or something.
And then he tells Romeo and Cecil that, the reason I don't get along with my wife is because she cheated on me while I was on this super duper secret mission that I couldn't tell her anything about, but I will tell it to a complete stranger.
That I was spying.
Yeah, that I was doing a spy. And, I was sworn to never say that, but I just told you, total stranger.
Italian boy who I've never met before.
Right. But I didn't tell my wife because fuck her, I guess.
Right.
I don't care what she thinks because I'm a bastard.
I consolidated the entire storyline with Mackenzie's father-in-law into this paragraph. Mm-hmm. We meet his father-in-law basically at this point in the story, and I just said, I'm not going to come back to this. I'm doing it all right now.
Because it's fucking dumb and pointless.
His father-in-law, Mr. Bigelow, is MAGA and wears a Make America Great Again red hat. He
And
smells like a dirty diaper.
Yeah, because he's old and walks around on a walker. So, yeah, it seems like the author is like vaguely anti-Trump or something, or at least anti-MAGA. I don't know.
It just feels like he wanted to create a MAGA character to punch at.
Yeah.
But this guy doesn't really do anything wrong.
Yeah, he's just asking for his rent money.
He was the father of Mackenzie's wife who died a few years ago. So he calls him his former father-in-law because that's how that works when your wife dies.
I guess.
Mr. Bigelow was also his landlord. At the time of her death, Mr. Bigelow was like, hey, just take 3 months off of rent. It's fine. And then later he was like, hey, you owe me that $10,000, you bastard. And it's like, okay, you should have had that in writing if it was forgiven. If you want this to be forgiven, you need to actually ask for it in writing.
Right.
Otherwise, he can just hold it over your head.
Yeah. So I have a theory about this little bit here, because Mackenzie said, oh, he didn't, because after he let go the 3 months of rent or something at first, he was like, I offered to pay him the rent after that. And he said, no, don't worry about it, because, ostensibly to be kind. And now, because money is tight, is what Mackenzie says, he wants the money. And I think I know the reason why. Because later he makes reference. He says, I haven't been this panicked since I lost the password to my Bitcoin.
Oh.
So I think what happened, he lost all his money in Bitcoin, and now he doesn't have any of his money.
Oh.
And he can't pay his bills.
And now Bigelow does not work for the defense.
No.
Bigelow is no part of this case.
Bigelow is getting
wanders around
bribed.
the courthouse to find Mackenzie and mess with him. But Bigelow comes in saying that the people in the British tourism industry are willing to settle for $150,000. And I was like, wait, he's not part of the defense. Why would anyone be talking to him? I think it's just because he wanted to have this character do something shitty or something.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. And to just walk around in a diaper and smell like shit.
Yeah. But the terms of it is Shakespeare must remain named as author of the works. And he's like, well, I'll have to think about it. And Bigelow's like, that's an awful big paycheck, implying that all of that money would go to Mackenzie. But also, DeVere couldn't take that money back in time. So who would the payout go to?
Right.
DeVere's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Why would there be money involved at all?
Yeah. But anyway,
Later on, he offers Mackenzie a double or nothing.
Which is... and Mackenzie accepts it for no reason.
But it's opposite of what this is. This is an offer of $150,000 to settle and say Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. Later he says, well, I'll tell you what. If you win the case, you don't owe me anything. But if you lose the case, you owe me $20,000.
Right.
What do you think of that deal? And Mackenzie writes him a check for $20,000, and he says he'll rip it up if Mackenzie wins.
Yeah, I don't...
Which is making motivation for him to win, whereas this motivation was to settle.
Right. But yeah, the whole double or nothing thing was just to add stakes to a story that has none.
And Mackenzie shouldn't even care about this case.
Right.
And this is the only way we can kind of make him care about it at all.
Yeah, in his words, he said, this case isn't important. This case is just to up my reputation. So...
I did see,
why stake $20,000 on this?
That this was kind of trying to mirror De Vere's relationship with Lord Burleigh and set up this evil father-in-law relationship between Mackenzie and Bigelow with De Vere and Burleigh. And I think the author was trying to be clever and show how it feels to have an overbearing, rich father-in-law who's just trying to pinch you for whatever he can get. And it's really done really poorly.
Yeah, because Mackenzie acts scared of Bigelow, but for, like, no reason. He's just, like, awkward.
Also, 3 months of rent for $10,000. Is this his house? Is this his office? And this was years ago. Like, what? Just move.
Yeah.
Move out of whatever it is, pay him, and you never have to talk to him again.
Right.
You clearly have no relationship with this man. Yeah. And it's also suggested that Bigelow was the one who told Mackenzie to take the case to drum up business for his practice. So it's like we want to blame him for everything.
Yeah.
On the stand, Henry Wriothesley testifies that he was briefly engaged to Vere's daughter, and he ran in the same social circles and lived at Cecil House from the ages of 8 to 21. How could a commoner, Shakespeare, know Wriothesley was the Baron of Titchfield? Because a poem written that was dedicated to Wriothesley also named him as Baron of Titchfield, even though he lived at Cecil House. And that is supposed to be a gotcha.
Again, this is like totally discounting the idea that gossip happens and is passed down through the ranks of people, like from the rich to the poor, because this guy is still treating this entire world as if it's static.
Also, it was trying to say that De Vere would have cared for him and loved him because he was engaged to his daughter and would have known about him. And that's why he wrote it and was dedicating it to him. And Shakespeare was a nobody who wouldn't have had any connection to him. But Wriothesley would have been coming into all of his money at the age of 21. And it doesn't hurt to flatter someone when they're 17, when they're going to get a shitload of money in 4 years.
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't see how that was an argument at all.
Yeah.
Back in time, Anne Cecil goes by Romeo, and she just behaves as Monday's proofreader.
Yeah.
We just keep going back and forth and trying to, like...
He's trying to, like, generate romance between two characters that, number one, there's no proof that there was any romance at all. Two characters we don't care about because we're not made to care about them. There's no anything to them.
They're paper dolls.
Yeah, De Vere's an ass.
Yeah.
He's an arrogant ass, and...
He dumped his wife, he didn't like her, he was rude and horrible, he went and found a young lover, and we're supposed to care.
And his wife is just this...
She's just sad.
Yeah, she's just sad.
That is her
Everyone
plot.
makes fun of her and calls her fat.
People call her a fat cow, she lost all this weight, and she's sad.
Yeah.
And she wants her husband to love her.
That's her entire character arc.
That is her whole character. We go back forward in time. Maya and Mackenzie are celebrating their anniversary. And this just weird little thing happened that Maya describes her buttons on her dress coming open. She works at the courthouse. She's a lawyer. Her dress came open and showed off her thong. And then we move on. And it's like, she would have felt mortified.
Right.
That would have been terrible. Why did you put this in here except to make her be the subject of ogling?
Yeah. And, like, that does nothing for the story. It was just to, like, make your girlfriend, like, a sex object for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Did he think, oh, at this point the story is pretty slow. I'd better add someone potentially showing their underwear a little bit.
Yeah, like, it just felt like it was putting her down for some reason.
Yeah.
And he jokes, well, at least you were wearing underwear, haha. And it's like,
that's such a boomer fucking thing to say, too.
If that happened to me and I was a lawyer working in a courthouse, I would cry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to have that level of exposure would just be horrifying.
Yeah.
And before she had mentioned it was their 64-month anniversary or something, and then she forgot about it. And he's making dinner for their anniversary because he remembered, and she forgot. Dumb her.
Yeah. Oh, he's such a good boyfriend.
Such a good boyfriend.
And she sucks. What a bitch.
Honestly, her character is really neutral in the whole book. She's there, she says a couple interesting things, and that's about it. But none of the characters in this are really interesting. Arya does make a Doctor Who joke, and you just know he hates the time that 10 met Shakespeare.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Which I look at it as the fact that 10 met Shakespeare is equally proof that Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare as this book is that De Vere wrote Shakespeare. They are equal in my mind.
Equal amounts of proof. As far as quality goes, the Doctor Who episode is much better.
Oh, that one was a really fun one, too. I liked that one.
Yeah. I like the Dickens one better, though.
That one was so good, too. Yeah, that was a good one. We go back in time. Anne asks De Vere why he writes. And he says it helps him understand the world and heals his mind when he feels crazy.
I'm such a deep boy. Appreciate me!
And that doesn't feel like sufficient motivation for the works of Shakespeare either.
No.
Because that feels like mad genius, you know, like to produce that amount of work if it was by one person in 5 years' time. Because we have to compress Edward de Vere's time to write all this stuff into 5 years. He does not have time to have done this over decades or many years the way Shakespeare would have, because he died in, 1604.
Yeah.
And supposedly, if this was a love thing, it was after his reconciliation with Anne, which limits him to have done all of that writing within this very short period of time.
Right. And he's trying to give Edward de Vere some amount of motivation, because right there, it's like, for the love of the game is what he's doing it for. It's because he loves doing it and art matters to him. And then later, again, it's the same thing when he's being held captive by the Queen and Burleigh. And he's just like, yes, my works could possibly inspire love between two people and understanding.
My works could heal someone's broken mind.
Right.
And it's like, okay.
And you know what? Fine. If that's your real motive, sure. But the motive changes when you're trying to prove that
this is a love story and it's autobiographical.
Yeah.
That is separate from this.
And then later you're trying to get credit for it. After you're dead.
On the stand, we meet John Farmer, the musician who tutored Vere. Vere was a brilliant musician, the most amazing. All of the plays had music in them, and John Farmer never heard of Shakespeare. That was the whole point of his chapter in the book. It's established that playwrights didn't need to be musicians for there to be music in their plays.
Right.
Because this guy admitted to writing music for plays.
Right. And you could have just asked someone how, like, if there is something intrinsic to that work that is somehow super musical or something, Shakespeare could have just asked someone who knew more about it than he did, because he was working in a troupe. He was working in a big play production with other people that had other talents.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people in that production. He could have took some kind of, word from somebody or something.
Or just someone on the who worked there was the one who wrote the music and played the music.
Right.
He didn't have to be this genius who knew everything.
Yeah. He wasn't a monolith. He was a guy.
Right.
And neither was Edward de Vere. He wasn't a monolith either. He was just a guy.
Right. Maya and Mackenzie are discussing his time travel, and Maya says, "You ripped off the plot of Shakespeare in Love and had Anne wear a disguise." But we have established he can't change things, and he's not supposed to be able to impact the body he's in.
Right.
So we're still breaking the rules that we established at the beginning of the book. And he's trying to get Anne Cecil back with de Vere.
Yeah, why? I mean, I guess he's trying to figure out why this is a love story because Edward de Vere posed that to him, and he has yet to figure out why.
And Edward de Vere won't tell him.
Yeah.
It says, he won't tell me. And she's like, well, you're going to have to figure it out on your own, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a really stupid legal defense.
But this is what they've told the jury. They're
Right.
trying to use this as the crux of their argument. The next day, Mackenzie bribes a janitor to let him into the courtroom on a Sunday to get back in the time machine. You didn't have to add that. You
Yeah.
didn't have to bribe someone.
We didn't know what day it was before
We didn't
this.
need to know what day it was. This time, we're going back and we see de Vere teaching boys their lines for a play called The History of Errors. And I don't know if that was something that we actually know de Vere wrote,
Yeah.
or if it's supposed to be the Comedy of Errors.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be like a precursor to Comedy of Errors, maybe.
Maybe. He's watching them rehearse, and then it kind of like skips in time, and we're watching the play as other people are watching the play.
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth is there. Everyone is clapping. They bow, and then the Secret Service come in and arrest de Vere. He had impregnated Anne Vavasour, a gentlewoman of the Queen's bedchamber, and she was actually part of the aristocracy.
Aristocracy.
Aristocracy, thank you. I cannot talk.
Aristocracy.
This ruined her prospects because she's pregnant and she can't go get married to anyone now.
Right.
And this causes de Vere's men and the Vavasour's men to have a street fight. And the queen points her finger at de Vere and says, "You're the one who caused all this trouble." So she
You're getting
throws
punished.
Anne Vavasour and de Vere into the Tower of London. And they're both punished.
Right. Which I find weird. Like, why would you, I don't know, like just giving two prisoners alone time together when they're already romantically involved? Like they're just gonna sit in the tower and screw, right?
I think the idea is she's about to give birth. And she gives birth in the tower.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also like, what are we going to do with her? What are we going to do with him? Well, stick them in there together. But that doesn't last long.
Right.
Because they go back in time and do a
swap.
However, in the future time, Lord Burleigh takes the stand, and Mackenzie questions him about Vere's schedule as a child. He had a full schedule. He played the lute. Burleigh was the most powerful man in England.
Whoop-de-doo.
He may have paid John Clapham, his secretary, to write Narcissus. He says the poem Venus and Adonis was written by the mystery man William Shakespeare. Burleigh has a temper. I can't ever see the point of a lot of these people testifying.
He's trying to establish like a lot of circumstantial stuff at the same time. He's trying to imply that Burleigh is a prick who's trying to kill de Vere, and he's trying to bring up the music thing again. Oh, he was a musical boy, wasn't he? Sure was. And also bringing up someone writing. I don't know what the fuck the assistant had anything to do with anything.
Here's something I find really interesting, though. Lord Burleigh wrote a series of precepts, like rules of good living for young men, or whatever. Like Benjamin Franklin wrote stuff like that.
Yeah.
He says he kept them on a paper in his pocket, and he would occasionally pull them out and read them. And Mackenzie tries to say, how would Shakespeare, a commoner, have known what was in the paper in your pocket? Implying it had to have been de Vere who knew him personally. How do you, Mackenzie, man 400 years later, know about the precepts that were in his pocket?
Right.
They had to have been published. or put
that
somewhere talked about.
Yeah.
Most men don't write precepts for good living and then keep them to themselves. They like to be pompous pricks and say everyone else should live this way.
Yeah, you want to go up to like young kids and stuff like that and preach or whatever.
That's the kind of thing you publish in a pamphlet and you hand out at schools or, clubs and say, you should make your children read this and follow these rules.
Right.
So I find that just really empty because the precepts are mentioned in Hamlet. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, Shakespeare couldn't have written this or known about this. And it's like, you're trying so hard to argue Shakespeare couldn't know any of these things, but you can't prove a negative like this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the main thing is you're trying to prove a negative and you can't prove or disprove a negative.
I have a quote from Mackenzie. Edward de Vere doesn't speak to his wife for 5 years. Then all of a sudden, the jury is supposed to believe they magically patched things up, and he went on a Shakespearean writing spree, turning out masterpieces like Othello that basically contradict everything I've been arguing in court. His own character cannot create a cohesive argument that he knows the jury will buy.
Yeah, because it doesn't make any fucking sense. Oh, I can't help but notice you skipped over totally the Shakespeare's dad. You want a quick word? I know it's a nothing, but...
What I actually did is similar to a book we did a little while back, The Inmate, where they were having flashbacks and flash forwards. I tried to combine flashbacks.
Oh, okay, that's in a different chunk.
I tried to combine chunks because I fucking hate back and forth, back and forth.
I gotcha. I wasn't criticizing. I know that was a nothing.
And I wrote only one paragraph, even though the John Shakespeare was chapters and pages and pages.
Yeah, it was at least 2 chapters on John Shakespeare that led to nothing. Because main thing about it is...
I didn't even bother rereading it this time.
Yeah.
The 3rd time through the book.
I listened to it twice, and it was even more nothing than I thought it was the first time.
Because I asked you, and you were like, no, it made sense. And you were trying to tell me. I went back through it, and I was like, you're wrong.
Yeah, I went back and reread it today, actually, and the impression I got from the first read was this was just him trying to establish that the contract that they were going over was written in Latin or something like that, and why not just use Shakespeare because he knew Latin, and why would you take it to...
Why would somebody else write this for you if your own son could do it for free?
Right. I think that was the entire point of 2 chapters of badgering John Shakespeare about land deals.
And it had to do with splitting up a piece of land and renting a piece to one person for this price and a piece of land to that person for that price. And if you contradict yourself, you're saying you gave someone a bad deal. And poor John Shakespeare is sitting there sweating like he's getting,
Yeah. Your Honor, relevance.
None of it was relevant. However, I do have a couple quotes. John says he was not willing to spend the money needed to educate Gilly. The defense is like, we're going to ignore that. He says he never learned how to read, and he never saw Gilly writing anything fancy.
Yeah, he didn't say, my son didn't know how to write at all, ever. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there's the argument over the lease, and there's just the question of whether Gilly went to school at all. But I really couldn't understand whether there was proof there or not.
There wasn't. It's just like, all it's doing is like trying to imply that there's something there without actually, saying it.
And at this point, the judge decides that William Shakespeare won't have to read anything when he's on the stand.
Yeah, because the defense is claiming that something weird is going on with the time machine and it's messing up Shakespeare's ability to read.
Only messing up Shakespeare's ability to read, not anyone else.
Because the author wants so badly for Shakespeare to not be able to goddamn read.
And both times I went through this, 3 times I went through this book. This part of the book, I wanted to give up and cry. Because I am out of shits. And this is only 75% through? Like, you're most of the way. And then they pull out Francis Bacon. And he says that he helped edit the first folio because Edward de Vere's daughters pulled together all the papers and had him and met with him and said, publish this, Edward de Vere's daughters said they told him Shakespeare was to be named as the author. Not that Shakespeare was the author.
Yeah.
Or that Shakespeare was the allonym. So even Francis Bacon is being given this wiggly, roundabout way of saying maybe it wasn't. Like, he says he didn't write any of the plays, so that puts the Francis Bacon question to bed, I guess. Because he doesn't care about it. The author doesn't think
he's
Francis
just
Bacon
obsessed
did
with Edward de Vere.
Yeah. And there's like this whole long discussion. Francis Bacon's family, De Vere's family, Lord Burleigh's family, and how these people knew those people. Ooh. And I could not care. I skipped all of that. Because none of it means
None of it
anything.
felt like it mattered.
No. They bring on the stand Ben Jonson, who testifies that he knew Shakespeare as an actor, and his letter in the first folio refers to Shakespeare as the soul of his age. And Mackenzie spends paragraphs and paragraphs arguing about spellings of J's versus I's in Ben Jonson's work.
Yeah, which has nothing to do with fucking Shakespeare's works.
No. Because at this point, De Vere was quite dead and would not have been, unless he was a ghost standing over him, writing his J's into I's.
Ah, maybe he possessed Ben Jonson, and...
It just establishes that lots of people used, sometimes they used J's and sometimes they used I's.
Yeah, because it didn't matter back then. I also want to bring up, as far as the whole Shakespeare not being able to read, I think I brought it up earlier. I feel like the argument for Shakespeare not being able to read is similar to how on TikTok all the Gen Z kids refuse to believe that Helen Keller was blind and deaf and was still capable of being able to do all the amazing things she did, like write books and teach and stuff like that.
And at this point, whether or not Shakespeare was able to read and write, he had a scribe.
Yeah.
And all of this work was oral. Most people were not literate. When I was reading about Elizabethan education, 25% of adult men were literate and able to read and write.
Yeah, and you can be a really good storyteller and still not be able to read and write. So this is just I don't care if Shakespeare literally wrote the works of Shakespeare. Actually, I don't care about any of it.
But this argument just feels like people saying he was incapable because he was from a lower class.
Yeah. It's really classist and snobbish.
Yes. I know that that's what he puts in the mouth of the defense. But I do agree with the defense there.
Yeah.
This comes across as snobbish.
I agree with the straw man, yes.
Yeah. Like, I'm sorry, man. He puts Shakespeare on the stand, and Shakespeare can't think of any reason anyone would use a pseudonym. And he agrees his name is on the plays in the first folio. But that's all he can put into his mouth because he can't write the way Shakespeare spoke or wrote. Like, he is not capable of actually giving eloquence to either of these characters.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, there's just not a whole lot of record of this kind of thing. So he can't pull from historical record to say anything that could shade one way or the other.
And I don't understand why Shakespeare wouldn't be willing to just say, yes, I was an allonym. Why would you just...
because he's dead.
This is fictional.
Who gives a shit?
You are writing a novel. Have him just stand up and say, yep, didn't write none of it. I got a paycheck. The end. It's because this guy is just obsessed with keeping it a conspiracy, it feels like.
Well, it also feels like he's trying to make the argument against, like, increasingly silly, and, like, there's no reason to keep Shakespeare as the author, and he's trying to bring the mainstream view down to his level.
Yeah. We go back in time, and I think I was able to compress all of the go back in time into one little section here.
Yeah, because there was a bunch. He just went back over and over again.
Yes, and a whole bunch of stuff happened. Anthony Munday goes looking for Gilly Shakespeare, which is what they call him in this book. And I've noticed other people who are anti authorship, whatever, they would call him the Stratford Boy or Gilly Shakespeare, or they would change it because they don't want that name to be attached to him anymore, and they try to detach him, and I thought that was really petty.
Yeah.
But they call him Gilly. He goes and he tries to find him. No, actually, this scene, Veer
He's trying
and
to set
Monday,
up a meet.
They pay Gilly Shakespeare to be the L&M.
Yeah.
And then later, he goes back in time and tries to find him because Burleigh and the Queen meet. There's a poem called Venus and Adonis that had a hidden meaning, and it was insulting to the Queen. Burleigh says that it was written by Shakespeare, but he believes the true author was Christopher Marlowe, and she orders that Marlowe and his friend Thomas Kidd get arrested and tortured. Monday is talking to Veer, and he's scared because Marlowe gets murdered and Kidd gets arrested, and he's like, don't you see why I needed an L&M? If they knew it was me, they would have murdered me. And this is the guy who was joking about being a homosexual 2 chapters ago.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Or however many years ago. I don't give a fuck.
Whatever.
Number one thing about the audio version of this book is the AI narrator did not know how to say the years.
I noticed that too.
Yeah, and it didn't even say like just the number like spoken out.
1,500. 1,500.
Yeah. That's exactly what it did. Oh my god. And the weird thing is, the faster you went, the better it sounded.
Reading it, though, most of these times, he didn't tell us the date that he was supposed to be going back to either.
Right.
And so I still couldn't tell when in time we were supposed to be, because he jumps backward and forward into Veer's life. And it's not established when these things happen.
Oh, there's another thing that happened with the AI while we're on the subject. There's a line he says, he looks to the defense table and realizes something, and the AI narrator says that twice in a row.
I think it was in the book twice in a row, too.
Okay, that makes sense. But the way it sounded, because every now and then in some of the audio versions, you'll come across like they kind of flubbed a line or something, or they felt like they needed to record it again, like an actual narrator. And that's what that sounded like to me, because the AI is like smart enough to like add a slightly different inflection to it. And I was like, oh, did he think he fucked that line up too?
I think that was editing, an editing error in the book part.
Yeah.
At this point is after Marlowe's murder. Mundy goes to find Gilly and warn him not to flee. Instead, Gilly, DeVere, and Monday are all arrested and taken to the Queen. And this is kind of like the final showdown to like show how this whole conspiracy happened.
Yeah, and to show Shakespeare as a big crying man baby.
Yeah, Gilly immediately is like, it wasn't me. I don't even know how to read and write. And the Queen is like, come on, suck it up, man.
Yeah, I'm only gonna murder you. It's fine.
DeVere confesses that he wrote the poem, whatever its name was, to honor his wife and Cecil. Lord Burleigh decrees that he is a traitor, but Veer claims the poem was about the rape of his wife and the rape of the Queen. He says it was the same man, Robert Dudley, and Anne had confessed to him that he raped Anne, and while doing that, he also admitted to raping the Queen.
And the Queen is now suddenly very sympathetic because she's also a victim of this rapist in the story.
And Anne Cecil hadn't been unfaithful, and she had gotten pregnant from that. And Veer asks for permission to write freely, but she's like, if we let you write whatever you want, everyone will, and it'll be anarchy. But if art can't be free, what can be free? And she agrees that he can have an L&M if all the money goes to Shakespeare. And that takes away the monetary
gain.
gain of this
Incentive.
situation. Right. And it's never to be spoken of by anyone present, because that's how conspiracies work.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks about it later in their memoirs.
Yeah, secrets are kept forever, every single time.
At this and this was during the time that Mackenzie got stuck in the past, I think.
Yeah.
And that was a nothing burger. He's like, oh, go home. And the AI ignores him and he gets stuck there and he's like, oh no, I'll be stuck. But then he's also in the courtroom at the same time,
Yeah.
listening to what's happening while in the body of Anthony Monday.
Yeah, why he had to be partially in the courtroom to experience it, I don't understand.
Because we could have switched to Maya's perspective because she's the one who gives the arguments.
Right. So
Instead of him.
So I don't know why he had to do this stupid shit. Like, he could have been totally stuck in the past and not part of this situation because the story isn't really about him.
Right.
This lawyer doesn't really matter.
You can just switch out any new
Right.
lawyer if they have the right argument and it's fine.
Yeah, you didn't need all his life stuff and all the other bullshit because the story is about someone else.
Maya questions Shakespeare about secretary hand versus italic hand and more I's and J's.
Yeah.
And I don't care.
Yeah.
Moving on.
It does not fucking matter. We don't give a shit.
We don't care.
So Mackenzie finally gets out by clicking his heels and saying "No place like home."
And doing a Dorothy.
Why that? Why that? Why? That doesn't.
It didn't make any sense.
No, it's just like what it. It feels like in the story it was implied that someone was fucking with the machine.
But nobody else knew he was using it except for Maya.
Right.
And she was stressed that he wasn't there to do the argument.
Yeah. So why anyone would be fucking with this in order to, or anyone that would know more about this to push him in the direction is the way this feels like it's trying to go.
I think it was to give us a momentary, oh no, what if he is stuck in the past? But we couldn't actually deal with that because he didn't have the imagination to actually split off and change the story.
And there were still no stakes because what
Still
he
no
could have
stakes.
done, all those periods that he went to the past over and over again, he was like getting nauseous and disoriented and stuff like that. And he's in here for like days at this point. You could have done something with that. You could have had him getting like increasingly fucked up and like horribly sick and like pop out in the middle of the trial and drama. You could have done something with that, and you did nothing with that.
He falls forward and vomits on Shakespeare's shoes.
Yeah, that would have been great.
I saw you agree to be the Alanim. Also, none of the things he goes back in time can be used in court.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I don't understand why he bothered.
Yeah, you can't pick up like any physical evidence or anything like that. So, yeah, why?
I think our last person who is on the stand is Henry Condell, and he testifies that he intimately knew Shakespeare, and as far as he knew, Shakespeare wrote the plays. And then Mackenzie spends however long questioning him about spelling his own name with an I or a Y. And that's the end of all of those parts of it.
Yeah, more spelling bullshit that no one cares about.
In closing arguments...
I'm pissed off about the closing arguments. Just gonna preface that.
Yeah.
Mackenzie's
closing arguments.
Yeah, that's fucked up what he says.
Yes. Do you want to take this part? Do you have
I don't
notes on it?
I've got like my complaints is what I've got written down. I wrote my notes on a tiny, tiny notebook, so.
He says that De Vere wrote under an allonym because he was afraid of Lord Burleigh. He has spelling coincidences for his proof. The Comedy of Errors had a globe, and Burleigh owned a globe. He has coincidences with maps. The plays had music, and Vere was a musician, but Shakespeare was not. Vere visited places in Italy that were mentioned in plays, but Shakespeare did not. Shakespeare only paid 13 shillings 4 pence in taxes, and this means he didn't own any books, suggesting he couldn't read. He claims the works are autobiographical for Vere. He wrote all the plays, poems, and sonnets in honor and love of his first wife, Anne Cecil. That was the summary I wrote. What are your thoughts?
That was not the part I was thinking about.
You're thinking about Wales' closing arguments.
Yeah, partly.
Okay, well then let's move on to that.
Yeah. Well, I think that... Didn't Mackenzie have a rebuttal or something?
Yeah, that's probably what you're thinking
Yeah,
of.
that's what I was thinking of.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, this is the actual closing. That was the closing argument.
Right.
Mr. Wales points out Vere's death in 1604, and he left money to his fellow actors. And this is the quote that you're mad about. Mm-hmm. No one has objected to William Shakespeare's authorship in 400 years.
Which, as you have said, is not true.
Not true.
Other books have been written about this. Mark Twain, as you told me, has also done this.
And the first questioning of authorship was in 1848, 160 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this part that he says is wrong.
His straw man is
Completely, utterly
fucking
wrong.
dumb. Yeah.
But then Mackenzie claps back by saying, no one questioned slavery or women not having the right to the vote in the last 400 years either.
Which isn't true either.
It isn't true either.
Women's rights have been advocated for a long fucking time.
In a lot of different places.
Yeah, they just weren't listened to.
And they have varied across the ages.
Yeah, and there were slavery abolitionists prior to slavery being abolished.
Abolitionists in America in the 16 and 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
We had them in our government.
There were people writing letters to Columbus saying, hey,
you're doing too much slavery.
The slavery you're doing, fucked up. You should not.
Yes, you are being too abusive.
So yeah, people have been questioning things for longer than the last 50 or so years or something. Whatever this author fucking thinks.
And him saying that made me go, really? And I went online and I found out that there have been hundreds of books written about the authorship question. Mm-hmm. People have posited that it was Francis Bacon, Edward de Vere, it was a woman, it was a group of people, it was this list of playwrights, it was that group of whatever. And other people have done mock trials doing this exact thing.
Yeah.
This guy is not original. He's pretending to be, though.
Right. He's plagiarizing someone else's. Okay, that's a little too strong. That's not the right.
That's too much.
Yeah.
You don't have.
I was trying to do a thing because he's saying that Shakespeare is plagiarizing Edward de Vere. I was trying to do a thing. That was not correct.
Just cut all that.
I gotta. Yeah.
He has taken other people's ideas that they had when his great-great-grandfather wasn't even born yet. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to say that this is brand spanking new in 2024 and no one ever thought of this before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he came across the Oxfordian theory online. It was just like, oh my god, why is no one talking about this? And it's because it's old fucking news and no one cares.
But you know what? He wrote 3 books about this before he wrote this one, saying that Edward de Vere wrote Shakespeare. I haven't read those, and I'm not going to.
Yeah, I'm never interacting with this author stuff again.
No.
He also wrote 2, like, scammy-sounding books on,
one was on real estate, and one was using radio ads to drive traffic to a website or something.
And they seemed really scammy, so...
I don't know.
I don't know for sure,
I'm not
but...
going to bother with any of it. So this guy's own argument, that no one has ever argued this before, are wrong in his own life.
Right. He's done this before.
He's done this before himself.
Oh, boy.
The jurors come back, quote, "We find sufficient evidence to further investigate the Shakespeare authorship question."
Which is not... that's the reason I
You told us at the beginning.
Quote the judge, "Using the latest in AI technology, we will settle once and for all the question, did Shakespeare write the works attributed to him?" And that is not what this fucking came to a conclusion about. This changed the stakes again.
It did.
Because trying to prove that Shakespeare did not write the works attributed to him is so much fucking harder than saying, oh, is there a reasonable doubt? Yeah, sure. That's such a different question.
we find sufficient evidence to further investigate, meaning nothing got proved.
Yeah.
Nothing has been proved.
We still don't know anything.
In his own book, the jury could not come back with a positive, you won, you're right, Edward de Vere wrote this.
Right.
In his own fucking book.
Also, when the jury came back, and it's Mackenzie and Maya, there's a line that I thought was the best one in the book. And as the jury is coming back in and they get their deliberation, Maya's face makes a face. Yes, and my ears are an ear.
My ears got an earful.
It's supposed to be Maya's making a face. Maya makes a face, but it's Maya's face makes a face. I want to know what face she made.
So Mackenzie,
because she didn't give a shit about the trial.
No, she has not really cared or been invested. She's gone back in time, twice? And it's all just to support Mackenzie and his striving for glory. Or whatever.
Yeah.
They won. Yay.
Fucking who gives a shit?
Bigelow rips up the check for $20,000 because that was the only stakes we ever actually created.
Also, as they're celebrating their little win, Mackenzie sees a reporter out of the corner of his eye that he thinks looks like his dead wife. And as he sees her, she just disappears.
And also in history, wasn't there someone?
Yeah, there was a scullery
like
maid.
wife?
He thought that looked like her, sort of, but he only realizes it in this moment. So now he's going on about love, and he says, before this trial, I didn't believe in true love, and I didn't believe that true love strikes twice. Or it could strike twice, which, if you didn't believe in true love, obviously you can't believe in it. You can't double not believe in true love. I don't know. This fucking writing sucks.
And De Vere is like, appreciate what you got. Don't let her go. She's a good one or whatever.
Yeah.
And he decides he doesn't propose. He says, let's go to Las Vegas.
Yeah, to Maya.
To Maya.
And cool. I don't give a fuck.
You want to hear a fun fact?
Sure. I'd like something to be fun about this entire thing.
I used Claude to help me do word counts. Statistical evidence presented by the defense is that she, with 2 E's, appeared 319 times in plays and 103 times in poems. Grief, with 2 E's, appeared 130 plus times. The word judge, spelled with I, appeared 88 times. And Juliet, spelled with an I, appeared 76 times. And using that to help me kind of make, how many times does he argue this? How many times does he say this came up?
Right.
Showed me how little I cared. Oh my god, are you okay? That was a spit take.
Oh god, I took a drink right as you said that. Oh god.
And then I thought I killed you.
Oh boy. Oh. God, I hope that didn't sound too bad.
Yeah, I still don't care. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, I could forgive a lot of this stupid shit. I can forgive the bad time travel. I can forgive the shitty court drama. I could forgive the characters not being very good.
Oh, yeah.
If the story was compelling or interesting, but nothing about the story gave me a reason to give a fuck about it.
No.
Or Robert De Vere. This had the opposite effect. I now want to know less about Shakespeare and Edward De Vere. I want to know less and care less.
Yeah.
So, in that aspect, if he was trying to drum up some amount of interest in his fucking theory, it's a failure. He fucked it. It felt like propaganda because he came in here with a clear agenda. And even when I was emailing back and forth with him, and I told him, we'll be critical, we're going to read it and, give our honest opinion. He's like, well, don't come in assuming you know the truth about William Shakespeare. Like, we don't give a fuck.
And I was like, I don't care about that. I
Right.
care about if this is a good story.
Yeah. We care about the narrative.
Yeah.
We don't give a fuck about some supposed author.
And I have to say, I'm really disappointed because that creationism story that had a time machine did it better.
Better
than
time
this.
travel. Way better.
And that was
Followed
such a
its
bad
internal
book.
rules better. Mm-hmm. Like, still not good, of course, but...
No, that was a bad one.
Yeah.
And this was so inconsistent. And he just wanted to push
His
propaganda,
agenda, yeah.
his agenda. And you can't do good storytelling when you have an agenda like that. And it showed up here.
Mm-hmm.
Not good storytelling. No one was interesting. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Write this as an argumentative essay and move on with your life.
Yep. And write it to someone in the Shakespeare community, because I can't imagine anyone else caring.
Right.
At all.
This seems like...
Who is this for?
This
Who is
is-
the intended audience?
This is like upper class conspiracy theorists who've been to college and have a master's degree and want to sit around arguing in a literature circle.
Right.
This is so far beyond my scope of experience that I cannot care at all. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who else cares about it. And
Yeah.
honestly, even online, it seemed like it was really fringe and really small.
Yeah. And, like, say, what if this author is correct about his theory?
Right. How
The
are you
story didn't give me... The story did not make me give a fuck.
No.
So, regardless of truth or not, I don't care.
You know what's funny? I looked up, did Shakespeare write Shakespeare on YouTube? And the 50-minute video I watched actually had me convinced.
Yeah.
This book, with its 4 hours and 200 pages, did not.
Boy.
And then I was reading other stuff, and they're like, yeah, we actually have records of his writing, and he owned this, and he did that. And I was like, oh, well, that blows all that out of the water. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I'm not learning any more about this.
Yep.
My brain is too full. Goodbye. If you have...
Was there any redeeming qualities in this to you? Because mine's just Maya's face made a face. That's the only thing I've got.
Okay, hear me out. Mm-hmm. We actually make a daytime television where we pull ghosts out of the machine and they tell us what they make of modern day history. And they are a peasant from 1504 that has only eaten turnips his whole life. Because we could follow the rules of the ghosts this guy wrote.
Yeah.
You could design a story where these guys have watched all of history and come out here with some batshit ideas because they grew up in this place, but now they've seen the future. Have you seen Sandman, the TV show, or read any of the comics?
Neil Gaiman.
Yes.
No, I haven't.
There's a character in it who becomes immortal. He like makes a wish or something.
Yeah.
And he becomes immortal and he doesn't age or die.
Right.
And I kind of love how that character is brought to modern day and he feels shame over participating in slavery. And he feels shame for his shitty business practices in 1805.
Yeah.
And he is like trying to learn and become better as people change and become better now. But he's also like... 100 years after he was born, he's like, look, we got hankies. We don't use our sleeves anymore. And I really love it. He's like, we got chimneys so the smoke don't burn our noses. And I just love like that idea of trying to imagine what someone who lived 400 years ago would actually think about a cell phone.
Right.
Because humans are not stupid. They would not be like, oh, magic, run away. Oh.
Right.
They would see a person holding it and be curious.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, wow, what is that? How is there a person in there? How does it speak to you? And they would want to pull it apart and find out what's going on.
Yeah, because humans are curious creatures. They're not
Yeah.
going to be like, oh, mighty Zeus,
Right.
don't strike me down with your magic square.
So I could see using a couple pieces creatively from like the time machine and doing something completely different.
Yeah, I feel like as far as like just the ghost concept, I think that's kind of neat. You could do something with that.
You could do
that's
something
neat.
fun with a 400-year-old ghost who has watched all of modern history.
Yeah.
And they could just tell you some crazy conspiracies. Or maybe they've been walking around invisible and watched people fuck, and they could tell us the history of fucking.
Yeah.
Because they would know what people were doing in their bedrooms the whole time.
Yeah.
Anything would be better than this.
The History of Butt Stuff by...
Anthony Monday.
Yeah. Boy. Well, letter grade. You got
A D.
D.
Because, I mean, it didn't have rape. It didn't have... I mean, it did have rape. It was briefly mentioned.
Yeah. Well, it was handled with some class. Like, it wasn't
Yes.
done badly.
It wasn't done bad. It was explained that this thing happened. It wasn't gruesome and detailed.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of the really gross stuff that's happened in other books. It just bored me to tears.
Yeah.
So it's a D.
Yeah. I agree. Like, D. There was a vast amount of bad research put into this. Or bad faith research, I think would be a better way to put it.
Maybe.
He's done a lot of work to make this entire story that isn't interesting or fun. So I respect the amount of work he put in. I just don't care about it.
And it wasn't convincing to me. And it was very repetitive.
The way it came across to me was like, I really like genetic stuff. But no one really cares to talk about genetic stuff because it's my pet little hobby thing. And no one knows enough about it to be able to like really talk to me.
Feed your conversation.
Right.
Yes.
Because no one gives a shit because it does nothing for anybody in their everyday. Why would you?
Right.
So, yeah. This guy's trying to have a conversation about a subject that no one will have a conversation about with him.
Right. Because the people who disagree with him are entrenched in their beliefs. And the people who agree with him are also entrenched in their beliefs.
Right.
And it's not going to be really productive for either side. Because honestly, a lot of the Shakespeare side people were like, well, they're lunatics or conspiracy theorists. We don't care.
Yeah.
And then the people on this side were saying, well, they're unwilling to look at what we have. And I won't wait.
They want to maintain the status quo or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm just unwilling to spend more time finding out who's right. Because I don't think you can.
Yeah. I don't think there's a way to prove either direction, and I don't think it matters even if you could.
I don't think it matters.
I don't think there should be any more research done into this, because
I think it matters the same way as whether Jesus was a real human or not. I don't care, and it doesn't matter. People are going to believe what they believe, and whether he existed or not doesn't impact that at all.
Sure.
So.
Ooh, fun thought experiment. How good of a belief system would Shakespeare be? Like, how good of a Jesus would Shakespeare be?
I mean, which character would be speaking for Jesus, though? Because you'd be saying Shakespeare is God, and he created these creatures. And one of them would be Jesus. Because you couldn't take his writings as promoting any one thing in particular.
Romilio could be Jesus or something. I don't know.
I did see that there was this really funny book that looked at, it was David Strauss, his investigation of the biography of Jesus, which shocked the public with its skepticism of the historical accuracy of the Gospels, and it influenced secular debate about Shakespeare. In 1848, Samuel Moshe Schmucker endeavored to rebut Strauss's doubts about the historicity of Christ by applying the same techniques satirically to the records of Shakespeare's life in his historic doubts respecting Shakespeare. However, he never doubted that Shakespeare was Shakespeare, but he unwittingly anticipated and rehearsed many of the arguments later offered for alternative authorship candidates. So by saying, you don't think Jesus was really Jesus? Well, what if Shakespeare wasn't Shakespeare? And then everyone took it and was like, yeah, he wasn't.
Oh, God.
Which I think applies to both. Like, you can't go back in time and prove any of this, man.
Right. Unless you're in this fictional story, which he still didn't prove. Fine, no, we got to end it. we're going to keep going on this for like years.
And it's funny because you and I have been doing this for a week.
Yeah, we've been talking about this before the episode, and we're still not done talking about it.
I am. I love you all. Good night.
Thanks for all the...
Nope. Good night.
Nope,
good
our
night.
socials.
Nope.
We love you. Bye. You gotta say bye.
Bye.